Imagine a quiet, verdant region of northern Portugal, where the air is saturated with the scent of eucalyptus and the freshness of the ocean breeze, and time seems to flow more slowly, submitting to the age-old rhythm of nature. Imagine the small town of Vila das Aves, and then the neighboring Santo Tirso, places far from roaring stadiums and the glamour of capital academies, places where not superstars but humble laborers are born. No one could have imagined that it was here, in this pastoral cradle, on February 13th, 2000, that a boy would be born whose feet were destined to conduct the attacks of the world's greatest clubs, and his name, Vítor Machado Ferreira, would become synonymous with football intelligence. This is not a story of how absolute poverty becomes the foundation for transformation. It is a story of how innate modesty and quiet genius enter into a battle with colossal ambitions, proving that greatness can be thoughtful, not loud. The story of the Ferreira family is a portrait of Portuguese devotion to football, where the game is not just a hobby, but life itself. His father, Vítor Manuel, was not a world-class star, but he knew the salt of this game from the inside. Being a footballer of a modest level himself, he went from player to coach, absorbing all the tactical wisdom and the bitterness of unfulfilled hopes. His mother, Anna, became that quiet support, that invisible force that allowed the family hearth to burn steadily and calmly. In their home, where little Vítor and his sister Mariana grew up, football was not entertainment. It was a religion. The father did not just throw a ball to his son, he saw in him what he himself could not achieve, not just talent, but the rarest gift, the ability to read the game, to see the field not as a set of lines, but as a living, breathing organism. He became for his son not just a parent, but a first mentor, the architect of a dream, who from the earliest years instilled in his mind a philosophy where thought is more important than strength, and vision of the field is more important than speed. Little Vitinha, as he was affectionately called in the family, having barely learned to walk, could not imagine himself without a ball. His toys were not soldiers or cars, but an old worn-out football, which became his faithful companion in the yard of their house in Santo Tirso. He did not strike it with crushing force, nor did he try to impress with power. He talked to it, tamed it, making it an extension of himself. The ball seemed to be tied to his feet by an invisible thread, obedient to every impulse of his thought. His father, watching this magic, understood. This boy did not need to be taught to love football. He only needed help to unlock what was already inherent in him by nature. He did not force him to juggle the ball for hours, but taught him to think, to analyze, to anticipate several moves ahead. These were lessons not in athleticism, but in football chess, where little Vítor was born to be a grandmaster. At the age of 7, when other children were just beginning to learn the basics of the game in school clubs, his father took him to the modest local club Póvoa de Lanhoso. This was not a sparkling training center, but almost a family hearth, where children from the surrounding towns played for the pure, unadulterated love of football. And here, the fragile, short boy, who was a head shorter than most of his peers, immediately became a phenomenon. The coaches looked at him with amazement. He did not push, did not engage in harsh tackles, but the ball invariably ended up with him. He did not run. He floated across the field, seeping through opponents like a ghost. His football intelligence was years ahead of his physical development. In a world that was already beginning to value power and athleticism, Vitinha was an anomaly, an artist who had accidentally ended up in an arena of gladiators. He did not fight for the ball, he tamed it, and this ability seemed almost supernatural. Rumors of the little genius from Santo Tirso who played the football of the future began to spread slowly through the northern region of Minho. His game was a symphony, where every movement was a perfectly timed note, and every pass was a perfect chord. And one day, on one of those unremarkable days that end up changing everything, this music was heard by those who were looking not just for players, but for future legends. At 11 years old in 2011, a call came to the Ferreira family's door. It was not just a call from a scout, it was the call of the dragon, the mythical symbol of the great Porto, a club that was a football mecca for every Portuguese boy. The invitation to the Olival Academy was an honor, but for his parents, it was also a very difficult decision. To let their 11-year-old son go to the big city into the merciless meat grinder of one of Europe's best academies meant cutting his childhood short. But Vítor Manuel and Anna understood. Their son's genius had become too constrained in the quiet world of Santo Tirso. The dream demanded sacrifices. Childhood was over. Ahead lay a path paved with trials and glory, a road to a dream that now belonged not only to him, but to all of Portuguese football. The Olival Academy became for the 11-year-old Vitinha not just a new school but a harsh world, a whole universe with its own laws, rituals, and deities. It was not just a training ground, it was the dragon's lair, a ruthless forge where talented but still fragile boys were forged into merciless winners, ready to die for the blue and white colors. The philosophy of Porto is not tactics on a board or drills with cones. It is the concept of mystica, a mystical, almost religious connection to the club, an innate hatred of defeat, and an unshakable belief in one's own superiority. Here, within walls steeped in the sweat and ambitions of generations, his greatest gift, football intelligence, collided with his greatest curse, physical fragility. Around him were athletic, powerful youths who, at 13 or 14, already looked like young gladiators. And Vitinha remained small, slender, almost weightless. Coaches shook their heads in doubt, watching him bounce off opponents in challenges. In a world where power and endurance were becoming key currencies, he was predicted to fail, considered too elegant, too academic, for the brutal reality of professional football. But Vitinha chose a different path. He did not try to become a gladiator. He honed the artist within himself. Realizing that he could never surpass his opponents in strength, he decided to surpass them in thought. Every training session became a chess match for him, where he calculated moves ahead while others merely reacted to the ball's movement. He did not fight for the ball, he hypnotized it, making it stick to his feet. He did not run through defenders, he seeped between them, changing direction so sharply and unpredictably that opponents lost their balance. His body was on the field, but his mind hovered above it, seeing open spaces, reading his teammates' intentions, and anticipating the enemy's mistakes. It was within these walls, in endless battles with stronger peers, that his playing style was born, and his nickname was born. O Mágico, the magician. He did not win with strength. He won with illusion, forcing everyone around him to play by his rules, at his tempo, submitting to his will. The years at the academy became for him not just a school of football but a school of survival, where he learned to turn his greatest weakness into his greatest weapon. He was not alone in his ascent. Fate brought him together with a generation that would later be called golden. Growing and maturing alongside him was Fábio Vieira, his creative twin, another fragile technician with whom he understood each other without words, creating intricate combinations on the field that were beyond the comprehension of others. Spearheading the attack was the dazzling Fábio Silva, a natural-born goal-scorer to whom Vitinha and Vieira delivered the ball with surgical precision. And in goal stood the impassable wall named Diogo Costa, the future number 1 of the senior national team. Together, they were not just a team. They were an organism that breathed in unison, a machine honed to perfection. They went through all the age categories from U15 to U19, dominating at the national level and making all of Portugal talk about them. The culmination of their journey together, the moment of truth for the entire golden generation, was the 2018-19 season and the UEFA Youth League competition. This was not just a tournament. It was their graduation project, a test of maturity in front of all of Europe. The Dragons, under the guidance of coach Mário Silva, swept aside one opponent after another, demonstrating a mature, tactically sound, and at the same time youthfully daring football. And at the center of this system, as the main conductor of the orchestra, stood Vitinha. He did not score many goals, but it was he who set the rhythm. It was through him that the entire game was built. He was the metronome that determined when the team needed to explode with a quick attack and when to calm the game down, taking control of the ball. The final match, which took place on April the 29th, 2019, in Nyon, Switzerland, became the apotheosis of their youth career. In the decisive battle, they faced London's Chelsea, whose academy was famous for its physically gifted and powerful trainees. It was a classic battle of David and Goliath, intelligence versus power. But the children of the dragon were ready. They took to the field and put on their best performance, securing a convincing 3-1 victory. When team captain Diogo lifted the trophy above his head, the world saw not just a winning team. The world saw the birth of a new generation of Portuguese stars, and in its heart, in the modest boy wearing number 10, it recognized the future maestro of big-time football. He proved that the magic of intelligence can defeat brute force. Now, he had to prove the same in the world of adult dragons, on the sacred turf of the Estadio do Dragão. The triumph in Nyon was not the finish line for Vitinha, but a starting pistol whose echo reverberated through the corridors of the Estadio do Dragão. He was no longer just a promising academy graduate, but a European champion, and his path lay straight to the first team's dressing room. There, anew, the most severe examiner of his life awaited him, Sergio Conceição. A former player with a volcanic temperament turned coach, Conceição was the guardian of Porto's sacred flame, a man for whom mystica was not an empty sound, but a life's creed. He was a new, even more demanding father figure who valued not so much elegance as character, not so much technique as the willingness to die on the field. For him, talent without the will to fight was just a beautiful but useless trinket, and Vitinha, the magician, had to prove to this stern warrior that behind his external fragility lay a core of steel. His first taste of senior football on the sacred turf of the Dragão came on January 14, 2020, in a Portuguese Cup match against Varzim. And 2 weeks later, on January 28th, he made his debut in the League Championship, coming on as a substitute in a game against Gil Vicente. Every appearance on the field was an invaluable lesson for him. He absorbed the speed, the toughness, the tactical complexity of the game at the highest level, understanding that here it was not enough to be just smarter. You had to be faster and more resilient. The 2019-20 season ended in triumph for Porto as they secured the Golden Double, winning the championship and the cup, and although Vitinha's contribution was modest, he felt part of this victory, part of the great machine. It seemed that his integration into the first team was just a matter of time, a gradual and logical process. But fate, that capricious and cruel goddess, was preparing a completely different scenario for him. In the summer of 2020, when the entire football world held its breath in anticipation of the new season, news came from the Porto camp that sounded like a thunderclap on a clear day. Vítor Ferreira was being sent on a one-year loan to the English club Wolverhampton Wanderers. This was not a promotion, not a logical step in his development. It was an exile. He was being sent to the English Premier League, to a league that was the absolute antithesis of his style. It was a world of titans, a coliseum of gladiators, a boiling cauldron of physical power where intelligence and technique were valued only when backed by steel muscles and reactive speed. He, an artist, was being thrown into a wolf pack, and that's exactly what his new team was called, Wolves, to see if magic could survive in a world ruled not by thought, but by muscle. The English nightmare began almost immediately. The head coach of Wolverhampton, his compatriot Nuno Espirito Santo, was a pragmatist to the core. He built a team based on athleticism, discipline, and counterattacks, and in this tactical scheme, there was simply no place for the fragile Portuguese playmaker. Vitinha was a foreign element, apart from a different machine. In training, he lost challenges, was pushed off the ball, and his delicate passes were lost in the hurricane of speed and physical struggle. He was lost, like a brilliant violinist forced to play with a sledgehammer on a construction site. Nuno did not trust him, bringing him on only for a few minutes at the end of matches when the outcome was already decided. Over the entire season, he played in just 19 Premier League matches, but only started in 5 of them, failing to score a single goal and providing only 1 assist in the League Cup. He sat on the bench under the cold English rain, watching a foreign, incomprehensible football, and felt his dream crumbling to dust. Loneliness, doubts, homesickness, all of it fell upon the 20-year-old boy, who found himself in such a hostile environment for the first time. He was a magician deprived of his magic. The culmination of this humiliating period was the decision by the Wolverhampton management at the end of the season. The loan agreement included a buyout option for €20 million, a substantial but quite affordable sum for a Premier League club. The verdict was delivered. The Wolves considered this price excessive. It was not just a refusal, it was a brand, unsuitable. The world that just a year ago had admired his talent in the UEFA Youth League now wrote him off. It was his deepest fall, a moment of truth that would either break him completely or make him indestructible. In the summer of 2021, Vitinha returned to Porto. It was not the triumphant return of a hero, but the quiet arrival of a prodigal son, over whom the shadow of English failure still loomed. He stepped onto his native soil, not as a young wunderkind with burning eyes, but as a fighter forged in the crucible of disappointment, in whose gaze one could read not youthful confusion, but a cold, almost icy determination to prove to the whole world, and most importantly to himself, that the verdict rendered in England was a mistake. He had changed. A year in the physically demanding Premier League, albeit unsuccessful, had not passed without a trace. He became stronger, more resilient, more aggressive in a sporting sense. He learned to take a hit, both literally and figuratively. And this change, this new steel in his character, was seen by the one whose opinion mattered more than anyone else's, Sergio Conceição. The coach, who had easily let him go on loan a year ago now, looked at him differently. He saw in Vitinha's eyes that very fire, that very sporting rage that he valued above all else. Conceição, a brilliant tactician and psychologist, understood. This boy had returned to become a man, and he was ready to give him the biggest chance of his life. The 2021-22 season was not just a renaissance for Vitinha. It was his personal masterpiece, a symphony of redemption played in all the stadiums of Portugal. Conceição did not just bring him back into the team, he made him the cornerstone of his new squad. He rebuilt the midfield, making Vitinha not just one of the cogs, but the heart and brain of the entire mechanism. He was now not an attacking playmaker, as he was seen in his youth, but a deep-lying conductor, playing as a number 8, the very box-to-box midfielder who connected defense and attack. He was everywhere, winning balls near his own penalty area, launching attacks from deep, and delivering incisive passes near the opponent's goal. He became Porto's metronome, setting the tempo and rhythm of the entire team's play. His football intelligence, honed in the academy, finally combined with the physical maturity and psychological resilience gained in England. It was the perfect fusion, creating one of the most dominant midfielders in Europe. His synergy with his midfield partners reached a cosmic level. Alongside him blossomed his old academy comrade Fábio Vieira, with whom he wove intricate combinations on the field, tearing apart opposing defenses. Shielding them in the holding role was the powerful Matheus Uribe, giving Vitinha the freedom to create. This trio became the indestructible core of the team, dominating every match. Vitinha didn't score dozens of goals, he only scored twice in the league all season, but his value wasn't measured by the numbers on the scoreboard. It was measured by the control, possession, tempo, and harmony he brought to the game. He was the unsung hero whose work allowed others to shine. Every pass he made was deliberate, every movement considered. He made the whole team play to his music, and that music was beautiful. His performances were so consistently outstanding that he was named the best midfielder of the month in the Portuguese league twice in a row, in December 2021 and January 2022, and in January, the best player of the month overall. By the spring of 2022, Porto had turned into an invincible machine, and Vitinha into its tireless engine. They swept everyone aside in the championship, displaying football of the highest class. The culmination of his personal redemption and the team's triumph came on May 7, 2022. In the penultimate round of the championship, Porto had to play away against their most bitter rival, Lisbon's Benfica. A victory at the Estádio da Luz, in the enemy's den, would guarantee them the championship title. And the Dragons did it. They secured a victory with a minimal score of 1-0, and when the final whistle blew, Vitinha fell to the turf, covering his face with his hands. These were not just tears of joy, but of the deepest relief. Just a year ago, he was a written-off failure, and now, a champion of Portugal, a key player of the team that had triumphed on the home ground of their main rival. But that was not the end. 15 days later, on May 22nd, Porto played in the final of the Portuguese Cup against Tondela. And again, Vitinha was at the center of the action, controlling his team's play as they secured a convincing 3-1 victory and completed the Golden Double. As he lifted the second trophy in 2 weeks above his head, he looked at the jubilant stands and understood. He was home. He had gone through humiliation, through exile, through doubt, but he had returned and conquered his country. He had proven to everyone, the coach, the critics, and himself, that his magic was real. At the end of the season, he was included in the symbolic team of the Portuguese championship and recognized as the best young player of the league. The king had returned to his throne, but now his kingdom seemed too small for him. New, even grander challenges loomed ahead. The Golden Double with Porto was a thunderous roar, its echo reaching the wealthiest and most ambitious capitals of Europe. Vitinha transformed from a local star into one of the most coveted targets on the transfer market. His name appeared in the notebooks of scouts, his game was dissected by analysts, and the press relentlessly linked him to clubs where he could take revenge for his English failure. But while the world was guessing, the strike came from where they act not on rumors, but on facts. On June 30th, 2022, the football world was shaken by news that was like a flash of lightning. Paris Saint Germain, the galactic project that had gathered a pantheon of living gods under its banner, activated his release clause. The sum of €41.5 million was paid without haggling or negotiations, decisively and unequivocally. For Vitinha, this was not just a transfer. It was a quantum leap into another universe. He was leaving a cozy, familiar home where he was king and conductor, and heading into the dazzlingly bright yet cold and ruthless world of superstars, into the city of lights, where pressure can grind even the strongest characters to dust. He was walking into a locker room where on one side of him sat Lionel Messi, a man whose name was synonymous with football. On the other, Neymar, a rebellious genius whose technique bordered on magic. And in front, Kylian Mbappé shone with his aura, the crown prince of the world game, already destined for the throne. His first season in Paris, 2022-2023, under coach Christophe Galtier, became his advanced school of survival among titans. Galtier, a pragmatic and cautious tactician, saw the Portuguese not as a creator, but as an ideal soldier, not a conductor, but a flawless accompanist. His task was not to write symphonies, but to ensure harmony, not to lead the game, but to create balance. He was the one who had to carry the piano while the great maestros performed their solos on it. Vitinha was thrown into the thick of it, into the midfield where he had to perform a huge volume of dirty work, covering for the brilliant but not always diligent in defense attacking trio from extra burdens. And he coped with this task brilliantly. His incredible endurance, tactical literacy, and absolute selflessness made him an indispensable element in Galtier's system. He started in almost every match, covering kilometers, making tackles, plugging holes. He was the shadow that allowed the stars to shine even brighter, and he did it silently, professionally, without a single complaint, while dramas and scandals constantly raged around the club. But deep down, he understood. This was not the role he had come to Paris for. He was born to conduct, and he was being made to be a mere stagehand. Parallel to this professional hurricane, his personal life, always hidden from prying eyes, was experiencing its most important and beautiful moment. Far from the flashes of cameras and the noise of stadiums, his own quiet love story was unfolding, becoming his salvation in this world of glamour and media frenzy. His chosen one was Tatiana Rendeiro, a girl with whom he had a long and strong relationship that began back home. She was not a model or a socialite. She was the architect of his mental equilibrium, his anchor, his quiet harbor in the stormy ocean of professional football. Tatiana became for him that island of normal life that was so necessary in Paris, where your every step is examined under a microscope. She moved with him to France, creating a home for him where he could be not a PSG star with a multi-million-dollar contract, but just Vítor. And the culmination of their love, an event that forever rewrote his frame of reference, was the birth of their first child. In September 2022, at the very beginning of his Parisian journey, their daughter was born, whom they named Mafalda. Fatherhood became for Vitinha not just a new status. It became his anchor, his main source of strength and maturity. When he held his tiny daughter in his arms, all the problems, The coach's tactical instructions, the press criticism, the pressure of the multi-thousand crowds receded into the background, turning into insignificant noise. He found a new, higher motivation. Now he played not only for the crest on his chest and not only for his dream. He played for his family, for his daughter's future. This gave him an incredible inner core, that maturity and icy calmness that are so necessary to survive and succeed in a volcano like PSG. The family became his armor, his protection from the madness that often reigned around the Parisian giant. He finished his first season as a French champion, playing a total of 49 matches in all competitions, scoring 2 goals and providing 4 assists. The statistics were modest, but behind them lay titanic work and an iron character. He had survived the first most difficult year. He had adapted, matured, become a father. He was ready for the next step, not even suspecting that the upcoming changes at the club would turn him from an accompanist into the main soloist of the Parisian orchestra. The summer of 2023 was not just a change of coach for Paris Saint Germain, but the end of an entire era, a tectonic shift that wiped the artificial galactic gloss from the club's face and forced it to start anew. The Titans, Lionel Messi and Neymar, left, and with them went the philosophy built on chaotic flashes of individual genius, on the hope that 3 great artists could paint a masterpiece without a common sketch. In their place came a man whose name was synonymous with system, control, and collective intelligence, the Spanish football revolutionary Luis Enrique. He arrived in Paris not to manage stars, but to build a star team, a single, complex organism subservient to his will and his ideas, based on total ball possession, intelligent pressing, and geometric passing accuracy. And at the center of this new emerging universe, at its very core, Enrique saw a figure that many before him had underestimated: the quiet Portuguese maestro, Vitinha. The Spanish coach, with his piercing analyst's gaze, saw in him not just a hard-working midfielder capable of performing a huge volume of dirty work. He saw in him the ideal conductor of his ideas, the brain and engine of the entire future system, the living embodiment of his football doctrine. For Enrique's philosophy, a thinker was needed, not an athlete, a creator, not a destroyer, a player with flawless technique, phenomenal vision of the field, and superhuman endurance, capable of being both an artist and an engineer at the same time. Vitinha was the perfect candidate, and Enrique did what his predecessor had not dared to do. He not only entrusted him with a place in the team, he handed him the conductor's baton, making him the absolute center of decision-making on the field. From a secondary character, from a modest accompanist for great soloists, Vitinha overnight transformed into the main protagonist, into the heart that made the entire team pulse at the rhythm he desired. The 2023-24 season became his personal coronation. Freed from the shackles of the workhorse role, he began to create. Now he didn't just provide balance, he created it himself, being in constant motion, linking defense and attack, dictating the tempo. His confidence grew with each match, and with it, a new, previously unseen element appeared in his game: effectiveness in decisive moments. He ceased to be just an assistant to assistants. He became a weapon himself. He began to shoot at goal more often, to take on players more boldly, to take responsibility in the final third of the field, demanding the ball in the most difficult situations. His statistics were transformed. Over the season, he scored 9 goals and provided 5 assists in all competitions, figures that for a central midfielder of his profile were an indicator of the highest class. But the real stage for the new maestro's enthronement was set not on the fields of League One, where PSG habitually dominated, but in the dazzling lights of the Champions League knockout stage. It was there, in the do-or-die matches, where the cost of an error is maximal and the pressure can break anyone, that Vitinha demonstrated his new leader's mentality. First, he scored a crucial goal in the round of 16 against Real Sociedad, showing that he was ready to decide episodes. But his true tour de force, his graduation work for the title of a world-class player, was the confrontation with Barcelona in the quarterfinals. This was not just a game. It was a battle of ideologies, a personal duel between Luis Enrique and his former club. And Vitinha became the main trump card in this duel. In the first match at the Parc des Princes, he scored a goal, keeping the tie alive for his team. And in the return leg at the Olympic Stadium in Barcelona, in the boiling cauldron of a hostile atmosphere, where his every step was accompanied by whistles and hatred, he took center stage. It was he who struck the goal of Marc-André ter Stegen with a crisp, unstoppable shot from outside the penalty area, which became not just a goal, but a dagger that pierced the heart of Catalan hope. He became one of the main architects of the historic comeback and PSG's advancement to the semi-finals. That evening, all of Europe saw the new Vitinha. This was no longer the modest boy from Porto, not the lost youth from Wolverhampton. This was a mature master, a cold-blooded killer capable of single-handedly deciding the outcomes of great matches. The contrast with his English period was devastating. The very player who was deemed unsuitable for the physical battle in the Premier League and was not bought for 20 million, was now the conductor of one of the richest clubs in the world and was worth at least 4 times as much. By the end of the season, his status had changed forever. From a quiet boy, he had turned into a Parisian maestro, from a reliable performer into an undisputed leader. He proved that his magic could work not only in Portugal, but at the very pinnacle of world football. Vitinha's story in the red and green colors of the national team is not a tale of a wunderkind's rapid rise, but a methodical, almost academic work of climbing to the top, step by step. He was part of the system from a very early age, that exemplary student who went through all the classes of the Portuguese football academy, from the U15 team to the U21 Olympic team. He was not the one the tabloids shouted about, predicting him the glory of the new Cristiano Ronaldo, but in every age category, he was a system-forming element, the brain center, that quiet genius around whom coaches built the game. His path in the national team was the same as his playing style, not flashy, but smart, not explosive, but fundamental. He was part of the generation that won the U17 European Championship in 2016 and the U19 in 2018, and in 2021 reached the final of the U21 European Championship, where the Portuguese only lost to Germany in the decisive match. He was always close to the trophies, always at the epicenter of success, but remained in the shadow of more flamboyant partners like Rafael Leão or Diogo Jota. The call-up to the main national team, to the Seleção das Quinas, team of the chosen ones, was not a leap of faith for him, but a well-deserved reward, the logical outcome of his phenomenal Renaissance season at Porto. On March 21, 2022, when his name first appeared on Fernando Santos's list, it was a recognition of his maturity. However, his debut, which took place on March 29 in the decisive World Cup playoff match against North Macedonia, was symbolic. He came on as a substitute in the 91st minute, when Portugal was already leading 2-0 and confidently securing their ticket to Qatar. It was like an initiation ritual. He was allowed to touch the great moment, to taste it, but the main roles in the play were performed by others. The journey to the 2022 World Cup in Qatar became his first serious experience on the global stage. He went there not as a starting player, but as an important option for rotation in the midfield, where titans like Bernardo Silva, Bruno Fernandes, and Ruben Neves reigned. Fernando Santos used him in 3 group stage matches, against Ghana, Uruguay, and South Korea, each time bringing him on as a substitute in the final stages to freshen up the game and maintain control. Vitinha performed his task flawlessly, but it was clear that in the hierarchy of the experienced and conservative coach, he was not yet ready to be the main conductor. When the knockout matches began, his time on the field was over. He watched the crushing demolition of Switzerland, 6-1, and the sensational defeat to Morocco, 0-1, in the quarterfinals from the bench. It was a valuable but bitter lesson. To become a leader of such a team, you need to be not just a smart player, you need to be a warrior, ready to turn the game around. The real transformation of his role in the national team began with the arrival of a new coach. After the Qatari disappointment, the Portuguese team was taken over by the Spaniard Roberto Martinez, a coach with a modern, attacking philosophy who valued technical and intelligent midfielders. It was the perfect scenario for Vitinha. Martinez, who had watched his transformation at PSG under Luis Enrique, saw the same potential in him. Portugal went through the Euro 2024 qualifying campaign flawlessly, winning all 10 matches, and Vitinha became an increasingly important part of Martinez's machine. He was no longer just a rotation player. He became a real contender for a place in the starting lineup. Vitinha arrived at the Euro 2024 championship in Germany with the status of one of the best midfielders in the world after his phenomenal season in Paris, and Martinez bet on him. In the very first group stage match against the Czech Republic, he was in the starting lineup and became one of the best on the field, receiving the Player of the Match award. His energy, his ability to advance the ball, his tactical discipline were a revelation. He was everywhere, linking defense and attack, and it was his play that allowed the Portuguese to snatch victory in a very tough match. He also started in the following games, against Turkey and Georgia, as well as the round of 16 match against Slovenia, which ended in a disappointing draw and elimination for Portugal in a penalty shootout. Despite the team's overall failure, this tournament was a personal triumph for Vitinha. He proved that he is ready to be a leader of the national team at the biggest forums. He ceased to be just one of a talented generation. He became its heart. As of November 2025, Vitinha is an undisputed starter for the Portuguese national team. In a team that is gradually undergoing a generational change and preparing for life after the departure of the great Cristiano Ronaldo, it is he, along with Bernardo Silva and Bruno Fernandes, who must form the central triangle that will lead the team of the chosen ones to new heights. He is the heir to the great Portuguese midfielders like Rui Costa and Deco, a player who combines their elegance with modern athleticism. His shoulders do not yet carry the full burden of the nation, but with each match, this burden becomes more palpable. Ahead is the qualifying campaign for the 2026 World Cup, and it is Vitinha who must become the metronome that sets Portugal's game to a winning rhythm. His service to the nation is just beginning, and the main battles for the glory of his country are still ahead of him. In the dazzling, almost surreal world of Paris, where fame, money, and temptations lurk around every corner, where every superstar's step becomes public knowledge and personal life turns into an endless series for the tabloids, Vitinha has built his own impregnable fortress. This fortress is his family, his quiet harbor, his personal world shielded from storms. As of November 2025, he is one of the highest-paid and most recognizable midfielders on the planet. But behind the mask of the cool-headed football maestro hides a man who fanatically protects his right to a simple, human life. He is the absolute anti-star in the most star-studded club in the world, a man who consciously chose the path of an introvert in an extroverted universe. His life in Paris is not about endless parties on the Champs-Élysées or dinners in Michelin-starred restaurants. His life is a cozy home in one of the quiet suburbs where his wife Tatiana and little daughter Mafalda await him. Tatiana Rendero, his companion for many years, has become for him not just a wife, but the main architect of his peace of mind. She has taken on the entire organization of their life, creating ideal conditions in which Vitinha can focus exclusively on football and recovery. She is his manager, his psychologist, his best friend, the invisible force that allows him to withstand colossal pressure. Their union is not a story of glamour and publicity. It is a story of a deep, mature love of two people who found support in each other. The birth of their daughter Mafalda in September 2022 only strengthened this foundation, turning him from a simple player into a man, a father, for whom the main trophies are not cups, but his child's smile. He rarely posts family photos, and if he does, they do not feature staged poses and expensive brands, only sincere, warm moments of fatherhood. His character is the complete opposite of his playing style. On the field, he is a bold, creative, risk-taking conductor, managing a most complex orchestra. Off the field, he is a quiet, modest, almost shy young man. He does not like giving interviews, avoids social events and red carpets. His world is home, the training ground, and the stadium. On his rare days off, he prefers not noisy companies, but quiet walks with his family or time spent on his hobbies. One of them, surprising to many, is music. Vitinha plays the guitar quite well, finding in melodies the same calm and harmony that he seeks on the football field. For him, music is a way to switch off, to reboot his brain, overflowing with tactical schemes and opponent analysis. Another of his hobbies is video games, particularly FIFA. But even here, he is not like many of his colleagues for whom games become almost an addiction. For him, it is just a way to relax, to briefly return to a world where football is just a game, not a job with multi-million-dollar responsibility. The foundation of his success, hidden from the eyes of the fans, is his phenomenal professionalism, brought to an absolute. The story of his transformation is not only the merit of Luis Enrique, but also the result of his own titanic work on himself. Understanding that his body is his main instrument, he treats it with almost religious reverence. His diet is planned down to the gram and calorie. He has completely given up fast food, sugary drinks, and processed foods that many footballers love. His diet is a perfect balance of proteins, complex carbohydrates, and healthy fats, lean meat, fish, fresh vegetables, quinoa. He works with a personal nutritionist who adjusts his diet depending on the workload and time of year. His training regime is another pillar of his consistency. He is one of the first to arrive at the training base and one of the last to leave. In addition to team practices, he has his own program that includes yoga for flexibility and injury prevention, Pilates to strengthen his core muscles, and special exercises for balance and coordination. He understood that in modern football, talent without fanatical work on one's body is only half of success. It is this discipline that allows him to withstand the crazy rhythm of matches, playing 50 to 60 games a season at the highest level without serious injuries, while many of his colleagues are constantly out of action. His attitude towards the fans is a reflection of his character, modest but deeply respectful. He does not put on a show, does not make loud statements on social media, where, unlike many stars, he has a relatively small number of followers. He communicates with the world through his game. For him, the best way to thank the fans is not a selfie or signing autographs, but complete dedication on the field, a smart pass, a one duel. He is one of those players whom true football connoisseurs love, not for the bright cover, but for the deep content. His legacy, which he is building right now, is not the legacy of a pop icon. It is the legacy of a pure football artist, a master of his craft, who proved that in an era of total marketing and self-promotion, one can become great by remaining true to oneself, one's family, and one's game. He is living proof that silence can be louder than any shout, and modesty can be the most convincing form of genius. And so we stand at the pinnacle of this story, looking back at the path traveled by the quiet boy from Santo Tirso. This is not just a biography. It is an epic saga of transformation, a monumental proof that in the deafening roar of modern football, obsessed with speed, athleticism, and physical power, the loudest, most dominant force is the power of thought. Vítor Machado Ferreira's journey is not a sprint, not a furious breakthrough down the flank. It is the ascent of a great mountaineer, where every step was measured, every ledge was taken with intelligence, and the summit was reached not through explosive strength, but through unwavering will and a brilliant vision of the entire route from the base to the peak. Remember the very beginning, that pastoral, almost sleepy world of northern Portugal, which became the cradle for a future genius. The home where football was not just a hobby, but the very fabric of life. His father, Vítor Manuel, who himself had gone through the sieve of professional football, became for his son not a coach, but a philosopher, instilling in him not the technique of a shot, but the sacred geometry of the game. He saw in his fragile son not a future athlete, but a future grandmaster, and taught him to play not with his feet, but with his head. The first steps in the modest Povoa de Lanhoso, where little Vitinha, a head shorter than his peers, already conducted the game like a veteran, were merely a prologue to the great call. The call of the dragon, the invitation to Porto, became the threshold that separated a carefree childhood from the merciless road to a dream. Within the walls of the Olival Academy, this forge of champions, his greatest gift collided with his greatest curse, physical fragility. He was predicted to fail, considered too elegant for a world ruled by muscles. But it was there, in that crucible where characters were forged, that he honed his main weapon, intelligence, transforming into Mágico, the magician, whose magic lay not in tricks, but in the ability to see what was hidden from others. The triumph in the UEFA Youth League with the Golden Generation was his first statement to all of Europe. Thought can conquer strength. Then came the first taste of glory in the main Porto team under the stern Sergio Conceição, and immediately after, a shocking, almost humiliating exile. The loan to Wolverhampton became his personal Golgotha, a descent into a football inferno. The English Premier League, that modern coliseum of physical power, rejected him. He was a foreign element in the world of Wolves, an artist forced to work with a sledgehammer in a quarry. The verdict, unsuitable, and the refusal to buy him for 20 million euros could have broken anyone else, erased them from the map of big-time football. But they only hardened him, turning youthful steel into unbreakable titanium. He returned to Porto, not as a broken exile but as a warrior with a cold fire in his eyes, ready for redemption. And the 2021-22 season became that redemption, his personal, divine comedy. He didn't just return to the squad. He became the heart of the team, its metronome, the chief architect of a triumphant golden double. He conquered Portugal, proving that his magic was real. He was a king, but his kingdom seemed too small for him. The leap to Paris Saint Germain was a leap into another galaxy. He found himself in a locker room with living gods, Messi, Neymar, Mbappé. And again he had to prove his worth, but this time in a new, most difficult role, that of a modest but indispensable accompanist for the great soloists. He was the one who carried the piano, and he did it with titanic diligence. He was the silent engineer of the galactic project, the tireless metronome who brought order to beautiful chaos, a man whose invisible work ensured that the brilliant masterpiece would not collapse under the weight of its own ego. But the main event of this period was not winning the French championship title, but the birth of his daughter, Mafalda. Fatherhood became his anchor, his armor against the madness of Parisian life, giving him the maturity that turns talented players into great ones. And when the revolutionary Luis Enrique took the coaching helm, everything changed. The Spaniard saw in him not an accompanist, but the main conductor of his new orchestra. The 2023-24 season became his coronation. He became the leader of PSG, scoring decisive goals in the Champions League, notably against Barcelona, and transformed from a quiet boy into a Parisian maestro, one of the elite midfielders in the world. In parallel, his methodical ascent in the Portuguese national team continued, where, from a rotation player, he became a key figure in the midfield, the heir to the great masters, destined to lead the Seleção into a new era. As of November 2025, Vitinha is at the absolute peak of his career. At 25 years old, he is the undisputed leader of the Paris Saint Germain midfield, a key player for the Portuguese national team, a champion of France and Portugal, and a winner of the UEFA Youth League. His transfer value has skyrocketed, and his play has become the benchmark for a modern central midfielder who must be able to do everything: defend, attack, dictate the tempo, and decide the outcome of matches. But behind all these regalia and achievements stands the same modest, quiet boy from Vila das Aves, for whom the greatest value is his fortress, his family. His life is an example of how one can reach the most dizzying heights without changing oneself, without turning into a media icon and a marketing product. His story is a hymn to professionalism, discipline, and strength of spirit. But Vitinha's symphony is not yet over. Ahead lies the main, most ambitious goal, the Holy Grail that separates great players from immortal legends. That is victory in the Champions League. The Paris Saint Germain project, rebuilt by Luis Enrique, now revolves around him. It is he who must become the conductor who will lead the Parisian orchestra to the coveted European triumph, to the summit that was never conquered by Ibrahimovic, Neymar, or Messi in a PSG shirt. This is his challenge, his mission, his chance to write his name in history in golden letters forever. Along with this, he is set to become one of the leaders of the new generation of the Portuguese national team at the 2026 World Cup, taking the baton from the departing legends and leading a nation accustomed only to victories. The story of Vítor Machado Ferreira is not just the journey of a footballer. It is a parable that in a world obsessed with physical attributes and XG statistics, there is still room for pure, primordial art. It is proof that intelligence, vision, and hard work can overcome any obstacle. His legacy is not just goals, assists, and trophies. His legacy is an inspiration for millions of boys around the world who do not have imposing physiques but possess a dream and a mind. He has shown them that you can be quiet and modest, and yet make the whole world listen to your music. This symphony is not yet finished, and its loudest chords, we are sure, are still to come. We will continue to follow every pass, every movement of this unique maestro, whose game is poetry in motion. If this story of journey, will, and intellect has resonated with you, if you, like us, believe that football is not only about strength but also art, then show your support. Like this video, subscribe to our channel so you don't miss new stories about the great heroes of the game, and hit the notification bell. Your support is the best reward for our work and the main motivation to move forward. Thank you for watching.